Hey, how's everybody today? Can everybody hear me okay? All right, great. We're just gonna jump in and get started here. I know that there's some people that are still trickling in, and I'll just approve them as they go along. This is in reference to Maryland's SB 760 regulations in reference to the new security guard laws and regulations that were passed by the Maryland State Legislature last year. So we're going to dive right into it. So what is MISA? We'll just go over this real quick. So MISA is the Maryland Investigators and Security Association. We are an association of private investigation and security companies throughout the state of Maryland. We're not a security company. We don't have any, we're not trying to sell you anything or sell you any services or anything of that nature, other than if you want to become a member of MISA and you're a security department, that's certainly possible. But generally, what we do is we work with the Maryland State Police as well as those legislatures in order to craft and augment regulations that have come about. Now, sometimes, unfortunately, the legislature does not accept or take our advice with things, in which case we kind of have to go through our local legislatures in order to get other things passed. But they do tend to pass laws that they just don't take some of our advice on. So that's what we're going to discuss today, is just in reference to the new regulations that have passed. These regulations affect not only the security guard agencies within the state of Maryland, but also affect all properties within the state of Maryland that have in-house security. So just a little bit about myself. I'm the acting president of MISA. I'm a former law enforcement officer of 15 years. I started out as a diplomatic security service. Then I went to the Salisbury City Police. I was actually at Ocean City for a summer prior to that. Then I went to the Wacomico County Sheriff's Office. I do own a security company. I've been through SWAT school. I'm a certified protective detail specialist and running a protective detail. And I'm a certified Maryland Police and Corrections Training Commission instructor. Also baton, pepper, JPX, less lethal, handcuffing, defensive tactics, so on and so forth. I've been in the security industry since 1995. So moving forward from that, let's take a look at what the overview of the SB 760 regulations are. And then we're going to go through what that means for you, and then what ultimately you need to do in order to get applications approved and access their new web portal. So basically, the key issues of SB 760 was to enhance training requirements. Prior to SB 760, there were no training requirements required in the state of Maryland for security officers. Now, security guard companies, lots of them took it upon themselves to provide their own training in order to limit liability. But prior to this, there was no mandatory training. And a lot of other states do have mandatory training, so they went with mandatory training requirements. There is certification requirements as far as security guards are concerned as well, and we'll go over that. That's separate from training. And then there's an operational procedure of how things are supposed to flow, how you have to complete applications, and how licensing is done. And that's what we're going to discuss now. So the overview of SB 760 is it requires all security guards. It doesn't matter whether the security guards are employed by a security guard company, which is licensed by the Maryland State Police, or at least should be licensed by the Maryland State Police, or individual properties that have their own in-house security. It also affects anyone that provides a security function. So if you have security guards, but you call them courtesy patrol or greeters or what have you, as long as they perform any type of security function, it directly impacts them. So they have to undergo this process, and it's very clear about that. So not to say that, if you have someone sitting at a front desk that just greets people coming through the door, that's not necessarily a security function. But if you have someone that's checking IDs or signing people in or something of that nature, they may be considered a security function. It's kind of left up to interpretation, but the regulation itself is specific that it's anyone that performs any type of security function. They have to be licensed by the Maryland State Police. So, and we're going to talk about what that is. There is an exception to that, two exceptions actually. One is for unarmed bar security, typically what we would consider bouncers, and currently certified police officers. So if you're hiring certified police officers to protect your property, they're not required to undergo the training, and they're exempt from that requirement. It does require all properties to carry a minimum of $500,000 general liability insurance if they employ a total of under 5 security guards. It doesn't matter whether they're part-time, full-time, whatever the deal is. If it's under 5, you're required to have 500,000 general liability. If it's over 5 total, you're required to have $1 million. And my recommendation would be that you have a specific security liability policy in place other than that of just general liability, because security liability generally insures you against assault versus just a general liability policy. It requires use of force reporting within 48 hours. And we'll get into more into that, but basically, if any security officer uses any use of force over that of a simple escort, there is a requirement, with the exception of hospitals that use EP, meaning emergency petition security to handle their EPs. It requires a use of force report within 48 hours to the Maryland State Police Licensing Division. It requires all security guards to be fingerprinted, trained per standards, and the applications have to be submitted prior to working. They don't have to necessarily be approved or licensed, but they have to be approved, or rather, the applications have to be submitted to the Maryland State Police Licensing Division prior to them working, which also means that they have to have their training completed. We'll talk about more about that. Anyone armed must have a security guard card and must be qualified as a security guard on their handgun permit. So if you are hiring in-house security that carries a firearm, they're required to have after January 1st, they're going to be required to have a security guard card issued by the state police, and are going to be required to have a firearms permit with a security qualification. So people that go out and get handgun permits through civilian means, it's fine, but they'll have to have a security qualification for that handgun permit. And guys that are asking questions, I'll answer your questions here shortly. Give me 1 second. So the mandatory training program, the state has come out with a mandatory training program for all security officers. The mandatory training program is 12 hours. It has to be done by a certified Maryland and Police Corrections Training Commission instructor. There are a number of companies that do provide this. If you go to our website, which is misahq.com, you can look under training, and we have a list of these companies that currently provide that training, who are our current members. So MISA does vet its current, or rather its membership, in order to establish that they're licensed properly. We don't endorse any particular member or training organization, but we do vet them to make sure that they are properly licensed in order to provide that training. So that training is has to be live, meaning that it is not an online training course that can be taken as some type of like walkthrough training course, and then there's a test. The class has to be done in a quote unquote live setting, means that they either have to be in front of an instructor to take the course, or they can take the course online with an instructor as long as that course is live, meaning that they are sitting there on a webcam in view of the instructor, and the instructor is alive teaching this class. There's no exception otherwise. Once that class is completed, it's a 12-hour class. There are specific objectives that have to be taught. Once that course is completed, your training instructor should release a certificate to you for everyone that attends that class, that will be used to submit with the security officer's application to the Maryland State Police. So having said that, what's also required is that each security guard has to be fingerprinted, and they have to be fingerprinted at a live scan location. Live scan locations are throughout Maryland. They are run by private businesses, or you can go to the MVA and get it. If you put in live scan location near me into Google, it'll pull up live scan location. So prior to submitting their application, they have to have gone through the training class and obtained a certificate for 12 hours of training, certified training. And that instructor has to be a certified MPCTC instructor, and to teach security, excuse me, and they have to have their fingerprints done. And the fingerprint is going to give you a result page with a fingerprinting number on it. There is an ongoing educational requirement, meaning that every 3 years, all security officers have to renew their security guard certification through the Maryland State Police. And what that means is they have to submit another application online, which will be online, I should say. They have to get re-fingerprinted, and they have to go through 8 hours of in-service training that, again, is certified by Maryland State Police, or excuse me, a Maryland Police and Corrections Training Commission instructor. And just so you know, MPCTC is a agency in Maryland that certifies all police officers, special police officers, and now security officers throughout the state. When I say certifies, I mean that they mandate what the training requirements are. The instructors actually certify them, and then that certificate is included with their security guard application to the state police. So the pros of this are obviously complete or improved compliance with regulations that you know to follow, enhanced professionalism of your security staff, hopefully increased trust from clients, better risk management practices, most definitely. So if you have or have had security guards with little or no training, you know, I personally don't recommend that, because if anything ever happens, there's a serious liability problem there. Potential liability claims, obviously, and it does have a more streamlined hiring process, although I'm sure it's going to be bumpy to start, unfortunately. The cons here are obviously there's an increased training cost for employers. So, and again, it doesn't matter whether you're a security guard company or you're just a private, ordinary HOA or hotel or what have you. If they're providing any type of security function, they have to be licensed. So there's a licensing fee involved. That's $15 to the state police. There is the cost of fingerprinting, which is usually 60, 65 bucks, depending on where you go. And then there's the cost of the training class, and that's whoever you get that training, whatever provider you get that training through. There's potential staffing shortages, of course. It is a 12-hour class, so depending on the instructor or whatever training agency that you go with, it could be one 12-hour day, which is definitely a long day. It could be 2 6-hour days. It could be, 3 4-hour days. It just depends on how they do it. But those people have to be available for that time period. There is an administrative burden of compliance and tracking. So if you have in-house security specifically, then you're liable for making sure that all your security guards are trained to standard, are licensed, and that you're tracking use of force reports to the state police, and that all their information is submitted accurately to the state police and they're licensed correctly. There are challenges in adapting new standards, obviously. Existing security staff might have some resistance to this. Now, I've had questions in the past. What happens if Maryland State Police turns down the licensing of a security guard? So there are situations where security guards don't get licensed. The license will be submitted to the state police, and the state police will turn down their application, generally because of a criminal history issue. So it could be that they, I don't know, had a theft in their past or had some type of other issues, and they will deny the application. And what happens there is they have the security guard him or herself, has the ability to appeal that to the Maryland State Police Licensing Division, and then they have a meeting with that person, and potentially they could approve the application after that. However, the bottom line is that if they refuse the application, or they deny the application, I should say, then that security guard cannot work in a security guard capacity any longer. They either have to be terminated or they have to be reassigned to a non-security function within your organization. That just is what it is. And having said that, I completely understand. You might have had a guy or a gal working there for 15 years, and the state police turned down the licensing for them, and it is what it is. So this happens with security guard companies now. This is no different. If they deny licensing for a particular individual, then generally we have to terminate them. It just unfortunately is what it is. And of course, there's a financial strain on smaller organizations. So if you're an HOA or a hotel that employs one security guard, there's no exemption, unfortunately. So this is just what I talked about in reference to, the in-house training requirements or contract. And by the way, this regulation SB 760 applies to both the security guard companies and applies to in-house security. So moving forward, these are the links that you have to know, and I know obviously it's a long link, so I'll be happy to send this out to everybody. I've got everybody's email address that registered, so I'll be happy to send this out to everybody after the presentation. But the first link is to the licensing portal, which we'll discuss here in a minute, and then current regulations that are issued by the Maryland State Police Licensing Division are underneath this second link here. And that's where you can check for upcoming regulations as well. So these are the new security bills that have come out. And we're going to go through these one at a time. Or, excuse me, not security bills, but the advisories by the Maryland State Police and their dates associated with it. Give me 1 second here. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see that. This is the first advisory that came out on April 18th, 2023 about SB 760 and SB 729. This was the update. This memo basically says that the original effective date was June 1st, 2024, and then they moved that effective date to January 1st, 2025. So what that means for security guard employers is that applications have to be submitted by January 1st, 2025 for their personnel. This came out on September 16th. This again undergoes the effective date. It also details what they have to complete as far as training. You notice here it says they have to complete 12 hours of initial training. And then they have to complete 8 hours of in-service by a Maryland Police and Corrections training provider. And they have to present their certificate with a renewal application as well as their initial 12-hour training application. So information on new security guard and initial licensing training can be found on the Maryland Police and Corrections website. There's also a link onto the on the Maryland State Police website, which I put up, but I will disseminate that to everybody. MPCTC regulates all the training for security. Maryland State Police regulates all the licensing for security. So once a training certification is completed, again, it's got to be submitted to Maryland State Police. This is September 16th, revised. And this details what a security guard employer means. So it states here that a security guard employer means any person who employs a security guard only to provide security guard services to the person. A person is defined by business and occupations article, an individual, receiver, trustee, guardian, personal representative, fiduciary, or representative of any kind, firm, partnership, or association, corporation, or other entity. Security guard services is defined as any activity that is performed for compensation as a security guard to protect an individual or property. That's what the definitions are. This was issued on October 15th in reference to now we're getting into the security guard portal and how this is going to be laid out. So initially this stated that all paper applications received after Friday, December 27th will not be accepted and will be returned with the applications on how to resubmit them electronically to the licensing portal. So currently all security guard companies complete a paper application, attach photos of the security officer, as well as a payment to the Maryland State Police, and send it off to Maryland State Police Licensing Division. What's happening after January 1st is that all applications for security guards are going to go through their electronic portal. So more than likely, and I can't say 100%, but because I haven't seen it, but more than likely what's going to happen is, excuse me, they're going to open up the portal for security guard companies. Security guard company pre-registration for that portal is already in effect. They do not have pre-registration yet for properties. However, that's coming very shortly. And I just had contact with MSP today in reference to that. So what's happening right now is that security guard companies are required to register on that online portal in order to process applications by January 1st. And then very shortly, my understanding is that there'll be a link on the portal, and I'll show you how to get to all that stuff for private properties to engage in that portal. So what's going to happen is you're going to go to the portal. You're going to log in after you receive your login information, obviously, and you're going to submit the application in a digital format for the security officer. It's kind of up in the air whether the security officer has to complete the application or you do on behalf of the security officer. I would assume that they have to sign the application as well as you have to sign the application, because that's the way it is currently. So it might be something that you have to do with them there in person. You're going to have to submit, more than likely, again, you're going to have to submit photographs of that person. Typically, they have to be 2x2 photos, so 2 inches by 2 inches. There's going to be a payment link for you to be able to pay online. That's a $15 fee. You have to submit copies of the fingerprinting that had occurred, as well as that number that's included on the fingerprinting application. And then you're also going to have to include the certificate for the training. And all that stuff's going to be uploaded to the MSP portal. So this came out October 18th. And this is stating that, again, all paper applications must be physically received by the division by December 27th. Again, as a property owner or management company, you cannot send in paper applications for your security guards. All paper applications are only currently are for security guard companies. After January 1st, as a property, you will be able to submit those applications through the online portal. So this memo is basically geared towards security guard companies. This is talking about the use of force requirement, the insurance requirements, and so on and so forth. And you see here, it's stated that a use of force has to be submitted within 48 hours. There is an exemption if that security officer is injured and is in the hospital, obviously, then that gets extended out. Now, there will be, again, supposedly a link on the portal that will allow you to submit a use of force report under this requirement. So, going back to the slideshow here, this is the application portal. If you go to Maryland Regulated Firearm License Application Portal link, this is what it's going to come up as. And actually at the bottom of this, you see here that it states security guard employers is requesting that all security guard employers complete a brief registration before January 1st, 2025. As of January 1st, 2025, security guard employers must be registered in order to lawfully employ a security guard. Please note that a registration requires proof of commercial general liability insurance. This means that in order to have access to the portal, you have to register you as a security guard employer, and you have to provide proof of that insurance requirement before you can even get into the portal in order to process that license. This is my understanding is that it's not currently open to security guard employees, meaning properties themselves. It's only open to security guard agencies in order to register. But again, that's supposed to be rectified soon. So right now, if you click on this link, it's going to ask you for a license number. And obviously you don't have a license number if you're a property. You're not going to be required to have a license number that I know of. If you're a property, it's just going to be required that you have a registration into the portal. Once you get into that portal, this is what it's going to look like basically. And you're going to have a button here that says, application, security guard application, or special police application, or application for security guard renewal, so on and so forth. And that's going to be on this licensing portal. So the benefit to this portal is that there's going to be tracking of applications. Currently, with security guard companies, once we mail that packet in, we don't know what happens to it. It generally is supposed to get, reviewed, approved, and then they send out the security guard card. But if that doesn't happen, it could go somewhere else and evaporate. So this will allow that processing to take place. Okay, so all in all, that's the nuts and bolts of it. I know it's kind of confusing. I would recommend that if you have any questions, to go to the Maryland State Police licensing website. I'll take questions here in a minute, but Maryland State Police website, licensing website, and review the regulations there. You can also go to the MISA website. It's misahq.com, and we have a lot of good stuff posted on there. And the other thing that I would recommend is that if you're a security organization, that you get a MISA membership, because we keep you in the loop of all these things, and we also work on legislation and so on and so forth for the security industry. But the benefit of one of the benefits of employing a security guard company as a provider is that if you do that and you're the property, you don't have to worry about any of these regulations because the security guard company is the one that has to comply with those regulations. Now you are required from a liability perspective, not a legal perspective, but you are required from a liability perspective to vet who your security guard company is, and just bear in mind that there are unlicensed security guard companies that are operating in the state. And if that's the case, then you could be held civilly liable for not vetting those companies properly. And again, I'm not telling you guys to go out and hire security companies instead of using your own staff. I'm not saying that at all. But what I'm saying is that alleviates your responsibility as a property if you're hiring a security company for compliance with this SB 760 regulations. So Nicole asked a question. Yeah, if they're on patrol of a parking lot and they call the police for crimes in progress, that is a security function. So that is correct. And it doesn't matter whether they use force or don't use force. I mean, I understand what you're saying that in reference to that, but it doesn't matter. If they provide any security function whatsoever, patrol, calling the police, what have you, they are subject to these regulations by law. So just bear that in mind. The training does not or should not rather, per its directives or per its regulations, instill in the security officers, according to the objectives, instill in the security officers to use any type of force at all. There are objectives that are mandated that the instructor has to teach per the Maryland Police and Corrections Training Commission. They have to teach certain objectives in order for your security officers to be certified. And having said that, part of that is civil and criminal liability, not arrest procedure and how to put handcuffs on somebody or something like that. That's not part of it. But to answer your question, yes, that it is. From what you have told me, those people will require to be licensed by the state police and undergo that training. Another question I had: how long is the license good for? It's good for 3 years. So every 3 years, that license has to be renewed, and they have to take 8 hours of in-service training. So as of January 1st is when you're going to start. You're going to register for access to the portal, and you're going to start submitting those applications to MSP. And then 3 years from that, from their licensing date, and they will receive or should receive a card in the mail, a security guard card in the mail, and it will be printed on there when their certification expires. They have to renew their security guard card, and you have to go through the entire process again. So they have to be fingerprinted and so on and so forth. Any other questions I can answer for you guys? Now's the time to ask. And you guys can unmute your microphones and speak up if you like. Okay, so
excuse me, I'm sorry. How do we do this if we don't even hire staff, like we're seasonal, but it has to be done by January 1st?
No, it's gonna be done online.
I'm sorry, you're asking how do you
like
seasonal?
Like we're seasonal, so we do it throughout the year. We don't start them all at the same time. So that's how do you find a class for all of these different times?
Sure. So there are classes available. I will tell you that and again, this isn't us. This is how the legislature passed the laws. When they come aboard, doesn't matter whether it's the summer or the spring or what have you, when they come aboard, they have to undergo the training, and the application has to be submitted to the state police with fingerprinting information. So it doesn't have to be done by January 1st if they're not a current employee. they are a current employee, then it has to be done by January 1st. If you employ them, I don't know, June or what have you, then that application, the training and what have you has to be submitted before they start.
And they can't start before that's done.
Correct. They
What's the
can't
turn? Yeah.
they can't do a security function before that's done. It has to be completed.
What's the turnaround on that?
So the training courses, whenever you can find a training course, there are training providers available. Again, I mean, you can do a search online, or you can go to our website, MISA, HQ.com, click under training, and it'll show you our current member training providers. They do hold classes routinely, once, twice, 3 times, 4 times a month. So there are classes out there to do, or in order to enroll them in. Once you get that certificate from the class, and again, it's a 12-hour class, so it shouldn't take that long, 1-2 days. Once you get that certificate, they go get fingerprinted. You submit their application online to Maryland State Police portal with their fingerprints, their payment, so on and so forth. And then they're good to work as long as that's been submitted. So the turnaround time for them to get their security guard card is however long MSP takes to issue it. And that's a toss up because they have only a certain amount of people working in the licensing section. I think the last count, I could be wrong, but I think the last count was 3 certified officers, maybe 4, and they have a number of civilians. So, obviously come January 1st, there's going to be a flood of applications, but they don't have to have their security guard card to work. They just have to, that information, a packet or electronically has to be submitted prior to them working.
So we went to Maryland State Police Barracks when this first came out, and they knew nothing about any of this.
Right. So the Maryland State Police Barracks, and I'm not going to speak for them, but I will tell you that they are not the licensing division.
Yeah.
So they have no idea about, typically speaking, they're not going to know about any of this stuff. That's
No
why we
officer
as an
knows.
organization are trying to get the word out there in reference to it, because not a lot of people know. The state legislature passes laws all the time, unfortunately, that people do not know about. And this is one of them. The problem herein is that there's a liability issue if, is MSP going to pop out of the woodwork and check whether your security guards are licensed? Initially, at least. Probably not, because they don't have that staff. But having said that, if anything ever happens on your property and it's investigated by the licensing division and they're found not to be licensed, not to have undergone the class and so on and so forth, then it opens you up not only for civil and criminal liabilities from MSP, but it also opens you up for civil liability from lawsuits. And there are currently attorneys that are marketing, gearing up for, especially particularly in Baltimore, gearing up for these new regulations in order to claim civil liability for them. So the first thing they're going to look at is, was this guy licensed? If he's not, that's going to be a serious issue. And according to me, in reference to my my civil liability background in security. So now I will say that MPCTC, Maryland Police and Corrections Training Commission, has already performed audits and is currently performing audits on the instructors. So they're serious about it. That's the only thing I can tell you, at least.
Yeah, it's really challenging, especially in a campground world, to try and get people to hire, much less have them go through a training.
Sure.
And get open. Like, we can't afford to not have people assist, but yet we have to afford to figure out somehow and have it done in a timely manner. It's just, it's interesting that we like I said, we have cops on property as well, so it's nuts to me.
I understand, and unfortunately,
understood.
Yeah, so we were actually we advocated uh the hours being reduced, and they were for initial training, because we felt that the objectives could be covered under a shorter amount of time than what was originally required. So we did our best, but unfortunately, there were a couple of incidents across the state, particularly in Baltimore, that has brought this requirement into effect. So that's where we're at. So, I got a question about, is guard training, if a guard's trained last year, is his or her training still valid? Yes, so if you're talking about in terms of the certified MPCTC training, it will be valid. Yes. If you're talking about some other type of training, they're not going to accept anything like that. So it has to be the certified training. But if they were trained last year, yeah, it should be accepted by Maryland State Police, and that's because they moved the line for the licensing requirement. And unfortunately, everyone that was a property that filled out those licensing packets, and we're supposed to have them in by June 1st last year, all those licensing packets are, I mean, I hold on to them because you can now enter them in online, or will be able to rather enter them in online through the portal, so you have all the information in front of you, but the packets themselves aren't going to be submitted. Yes, another question I had is this recorded? Yes, this is recorded. I'm going to send out the link for it with the presentation deck. Another question I got is it applicable to security camera industry with personnel or technicians? No, it's not. So this only applies to security guards. The Maryland State Police does license alarm technicians. The agency has to be licensed, and the alarm technicians themselves have to be individually licensed. But as of right now, there's no licensing requirement, at least from the state police's perspective, on camera installers. Now, obviously, you know, if you're installing I'm not going to get into it, but if you're installing cameras, you know, you're probably going to have a low voltage permit and so on and so forth. But it has nothing to do with us, the Maryland State Police. So there's no licensing requirement in reference to that.
Evan, I had a question.
Sure.
I'm a little bit confused. The December 27th deadline, that is for security companies like US Task and all them. And then January 1st is when companies like the casino, for instance, would submit our applications. Is that what we're going with?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And actually, they looked at December 27th and figured out that, what's that? So they looked at December 27th and figured out that it was coming up on a holiday, so they moved everything to January 1st. Did I answer your question, Sean?
Yeah, that answered my question. So we would just submit our request to be a facility on January 1st, as well as our applications, or I mean, like,
No, so the licensing portal request is supposed to be online shortly. I'm going to send an email out to everybody that's attended today in reference to that. So once we get an update from MSP, I'll send an email out to everybody that licensing portal is open for registration to properties. On January 1st is when you're going to submit all those applications, but you should be able to enroll in the portal before then.
Can you rope me in on that? You are using Rick Taylor as our contact, and that's still who is our contact. But if you could just add me to it as well as Rick, because clearly I'm here in the meeting.
Yeah, sure. No, absolutely. I'll take care of that. That's not a problem.
Thanks.
No problem. Were there any other questions? Any other questions I can answer for anybody? Okay, so if anyone has any questions that they don't necessarily want to ask in here, I'm going to send out my email to everybody in chat. And I'll be happy to answer your questions. That's my company email. Again, you know, like I said, I'm doing this as the acting president of MISA. I'm not pushing any particular security company or training organization. But if you go to our website and reference the training, meaning MISA HQ.com, you'll be able to find training providers on there. Any other questions I can answer for you guys? Okay, guys. Well, I appreciate it. And I will send this out as a link. Hopefully you guys found this helpful. And again, if you're a security agency or you're a property itself that has in-house security at a professional level, and you want to become a member of MISA, we'd love to have you. Thanks again, guys. You guys have a good
Thanks,
day.
Evan.
Sure, no problem.